Welcome to PCR TV at EuroPCR 2019. I'm Michel Azizi from Paris, and I have the pleasure to have with me Felix Mahfoud from Germany, and we are going to talk about renal denervation. Felix, can we say today that renal denervation is back, and what are the results of the new trials?
I think we can say it's back on track. We have 3 randomized sham-controlled studies in patients with and without medication that indeed prove the blood pressure lowering efficacy of renal denervation using radiofrequency, but also using ultrasound. So 2 technologies, 3 independent studies, and all were pretty much the same. They showed no sham effect. We controlled for almost all confounding factors, and we have proven that these technologies, there are 2, these technology really lower blood pressure, ambulatory and office. And again, these trials were conducted in patients who were either without any medication or on 1, 2, or 3 drugs. So I think we can say, yes, it lowers blood pressure, and yes, it is back.
So this is a very important point. Can you say something about safety? Is it safe to lower blood pressure using these technologies?
Well, we have 220, 250 patients treated right now and analyzed in these trials. We followed these patients for 6 months. We are continued to follow those patients. Short term, there were absolutely no safety signals. So yes, it is safe. It appears to be safe, but that's of course something that we need to prove in longer term follow-up too, that there is no stenosis occurring, that it is indeed safe also in terms of renal function, which I wouldn't expect to be an issue. But anyhow, we are following these patients very carefully to prove safety of these technologies.
Do you have also more longer term with cohort studies, I think with some registry?
Yeah. So there's one international registry, the Global Simplicity Registry, that we very recently published in the European Heart Journal, 3-year follow-up, 2,700 patients included. That's the biggest, largest database available thus far. And you know, in these registries, there is absolutely no sign of an increase in safety events. There is a continuous blood pressure fall, which is very interesting. It is indeed the cohort that we were following for the longest time point. So 3 years follow-up, no indications. Though with the limitations of registries, of course, it's not, not a controlled randomized trial, it's a registry. But I guess it provides very interesting insights into the long-term effects of renal denervation in real-world patients treated around the world with different phenotypes of hypertension. So an interesting and important resource for us scientifically.
So from this registry, do you think a new indication may appear, or do we have new trials showing efficacy for other things than hypertension?
Here at EuroPCR, there was a very interesting trial being presented, a trial out of South Africa. Michel Azizi presented it. And what he did is quite interesting. So he took patients who were at high risk for development of atrial fibrillation. So he has chosen patients with hypertensive heart disease and uncontrolled hypertension. And he randomized the patients to undergo renal denervation or sham treatment. And he was capable of documenting a significant reduction of risk of atrial fibrillation in these patients that were treated with renal denervation. So the risk reduction was 60%, which is great. He implanted these loop recorders, so rigorous follow-up. And it provides interesting insights into potential future indication for renal denervation or for neuromodulation overall, not only targeting hypertension, but going into other fields, antiarrhythmic, heart failure, certainly interesting, chronic kidney disease. We're exploring now, once we have proven that these technologies truly lower blood pressure, and I think that is what we can state now, the proof of principle is provided, that other indications beside hypertension are also interesting.
Very nice, very interesting, Felix. I would like now to just ask you a few questions about, for you, after all these years, who would be the best patient, the optimal patient to have renal denervation?
That's a very good question. I can get that question back to you. We're discussing this all the time. I mean, we started with the very severe resistant hypertensive patients who failed on everything, including medication. And then we turned that to the absolute opposite. We went to patients off drugs. So low cardiovascular risk, moderate to mild hypertensive patients. And I think that was interesting in two ways. One, we for the first time used a device-based approach in low-risk patients in a sham-controlled trial, and we proved that it is safe, which is important.
Yeah.
We also proved that there is no sham effect when you conduct these trials carefully and when you control for all confounding factors, but it also opens the potential indication for renal denervation, because it is likely, or it could be, that patients with milder forms of hypertension, early disease, that they benefit from denervation most. So, we started a paradigm shift for devices, this becoming one of the treatment options for hypertensive patients. And it will be interesting to see the larger pivotal studies now being completed. Hopefully they will prove what we have documented in these studies that we were discussing now. But I think we will move from these very severe resistant hypertensive patients to a younger patient population with low pulse wave velocity, not end-stage disease patients.
Yes.
I think that is where we're moving with this field now.
Thank you, Felix. So if I summarize what you have said, first, we can say now renal denervation is back, and there is no doubt that it lowers blood pressure. We have no safety signal, and it has been explored in other fields, which is really extremely interesting, atrial fibrillation, chronic kidney disease, etc. That we are probably for hypertension shifting in less severe forms of hypertension with this magnitude of drop in blood pressure, which is observed in clinical trial, probably which can be translated in terms of benefit if maintained on the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel.
Felix.